cryptocurrency craze that's going on, and things like blockchain. There's a lot of new terminology out there to try and grasp and understand. There are people who are in the know who seem to be making the most of it, but there are a lot of people who are on the sidelines wondering what's all this about, and afraid to put their toe into this space. So today's session is with Malcolm Tan, who is the Chief Strategic Advisor at Technicorum Holdings. So in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space, Malcolm has done regulatory reviews and consulted with multiple governments. Welcome, Malcolm. We were supposed to have the founder, but Daniel, the bureaucracy, but he's in Stockholm, so I'm not sure what the timing is there. If he's able to, he'll join in as well. How difficult is it for somebody who is on the fringes of this to get into this space?
For someone to get into a new industry, it really depends on how much time you devote into it. For myself, I consider myself a latecomer to this. I was at the tail end of the first level of adoption. You can often hear about the 4 stages of adoption of any new thing. So there's the first stage, all the early comers. Then the second stage, the people who saw the early comers dip their feet in the pool and then they come in. And then the third phase, which is the majority, they will say, oh, there's a new thing, let's go. And then the fourth, who are hidden in their caves and don't know anything. And then when the whole world has already moved on, then they come out and say, oh, okay, that's this thing, right? So I would say that we are now in the beginning of the second stage, where more and more people are getting into it. I would say easily 5 to 10% of the world is now getting into cryptocurrencies. Increasingly, we are seeing millennials getting into it. And I think most millennials who have an investment portfolio, I would say over 50% of them have already started accumulating cryptocurrencies. To me, the blockchain technology was something fantastic. When I first read about it, I had no idea about it. And then it was only after I started doing a lot of readings. It took me about 2 weeks to get up to speed. When I first started in late 2017, there were very little sites and information that were out there and were trustworthy. So because I saw the landscape and in the course of doing my own research, I figured that I might as well write a book to educate other people just as I was getting myself educated. Now, how I got into this was at that point, I just went onto apps like Meetup, Eventbrite, anything crypto related, I will attend a meeting. So Singapore has been and still is a crypto hub globally. So it was very easy to find 3 to 5 meetups per week to get into. And once I started getting in the space and building up a name for myself, because there were very few lawyers who got into the space as well. So for me, it took about 2 weeks to get up to speed, another 2 weeks to really read everything and to learn a lot of things. The second book that I published was on DeFi, and that was published last year in September. And decentralized finance is another big space that more and more people are getting into. Now I think the amount of money getting into DeFi is between $100 to $200 billion. The next book that I'm publishing within the next 1 to 2 months is on NFTs. So the last book and the next book I've co-authored with other writers as well. So essentially, it's a new technology, right? It's something new. It takes time for anyone to come to grips with it. It helps if you have some kind of fintech background or some kind of understanding of technology, but it's not really necessary. How I usually answer with one sentence instead of the many words I'm using now is everyone uses the internet. How many of you actually understand the internet, right? Hardly anybody does. So you don't really need to understand blockchain in order to be involved in cryptocurrency. You just need to understand the basic building blocks. So if you consider internet as the first level iteration, information transfer. So it's a global network of information transfer. When you send an email, when you send a message, when you send a text from one place to another through the internet protocols, you are sending information to the other side. And for blockchain, you are sending assets. So this is fantastic, right? So when I discovered this, I thought, okay, this is definitely going to be the next 10 to 30 years, because traditionally asset classes are 4. Right, you have cash and equivalents, commodities, equities, and real estate. And to me, I'm a firm believer that blockchain and cryptocurrencies are the 5th asset class, digital assets. There are now over 1,000 trillion worth of assets in the 4 main asset classes. plus derivatives, which are about the same as them. So it's about 500 trillion worth of all the four classes I mentioned, and then over 500 trillion of derivatives on top. Now, if you add digital assets as a new class, potentially it's trillions and trillions of dollars developing. And right now we are only at 2 trillion. So this is why I say we are only at the cusp of the second stage of adoption. And we still have a very long way to the hundreds of trillions that eventually will reside in the blockchain and cryptocurrencies.
And what is the scope of things that you can delve into within this space? I mean, you've got cryptocurrencies, you've got NFTs. What else? What else is there out there that people can dabble with?
Right. So blockchain is a core technology. As you can see, if you look at the patents list, the top 5 people like MasterCard, IBM, they have so many patents registered. I think the banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, even though they keep telling their people don't dabble in it, but they are getting so many IPs in it. China actually owns over 50% of the patents that have been registered in the blockchain space. So certainly governments are gearing up, and those who have been following the news, I think 2 or 3 years ago, President Xi, Chinese president, actually came out and declared to China, blockchain is the future. China is definitely going to be a big part of this. So governments are now all recognizing the utility of blockchain, and more of them are issuing their sovereign coins or CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. So what are the applications? Basically, anything that can be digitized is an application. For example, NFTs, because that's very topical right now, right? So NFTs, why NFTs? Because NFTs are an immutable and public proof that you own something. So for example, you've read about all the articles, of all the people who fake their university certificates, or all the people who applied for jobs without the real proof, and they just created something, just Photoshop something, and you have a certificate, right? So that's one great use case. You can create an NFT and show that you actually have gone through that course, and that's a proven piece of documentation. Or identity. Most of us are privileged, so we have identity. We belong to a country. You have the whole apparatus behind you. But for those who have lost their countries, those who are disenfranchised, those who have gone through civil war and lost identity, basically they have no way to prove that they own anything. So just imagine someone who has lost his home. A flood came, wiped out everything, or there's a civil war. There are civil wars going around the world, right? People do have to relocate and flee to another country. Once you're in another country, you have zero identity. So having an NFT with your digital identity is very important, because then you can prove that you actually own your identity. And you have heard of identity theft as well. If you actually have an NFT that is on the public blockchain and you can prove that it's you, it's not possible for anybody else to come in and cheat the system and to claim that it's you. Another great use case is real estate. You have title deeds. In fact, one funny anecdote I had was back when I was the chief legal counsel for an MNC in telecommunications. We had to relocate the building that our Philippines outfit was at. So we asked the lawyers, go check the title deeds, do the lease renewal or the lease renegotiation. And then they came back with something I'd never heard before. They said, a fire happened and the title deed is gone, it's burnt. So nobody has a title deed anymore. So that of course made things very difficult, right, to prove ownership. And imagine that can happen. That really does happen in the real world, so to speak. But if you actually had your proof of your title deed, or your title deed, there's a digital form, then it's on the internet. Anytime that you have the access to it, you can always retrieve it. So there's so many applications just for NFTs, and I'm only talking about NFTs here. In the world of corporate environments, those of you who are working with large corporations, you probably have your own intranet, a company intranet, and your company intranet is part of what we call as an ERP system, enterprise resource planning system. So ERP systems, intranet, all these are IT systems that help you to help your company to run the business more efficiently. You can have your HR systems, your payroll systems, your leave systems, your training systems, even interaction between you and other departments, procurement, etc. All can be on the intranet. Now, an extension of that would be blockchain. So another interesting story I have is back in 2017 when I was first starting out in the space, a big industrial player from Japan an MNC actually came and approached me and asked me for advice on how to implement blockchain technologies and cryptocurrency. So I looked at them and I was like, okay, cryptocurrencies are generally used by the retail people, the masses, or the retail investors. Why would you, a heavy industry player in an MNC, want to use cryptocurrency? So they said it's very simple, because they literally have thousands of subsidiaries all over the world. And every subsidiary, every month, their admin and finance people have a headache settling all the bills. Now, imagine if your ERP system also has your own cryptocurrency. And in fact, that's already existing today. IBM actually uses their own cryptocurrency to make settlements. JP Morgan actually has the JPM coin that actually does settlements within their banking customers database. So if you have one currency that your organization owns and you can settle between all your other outposts or subsidiaries, it makes things so much easier. Everything can be coded as long as there's no error with the code. Then you don't have any more human errors. You don't have calculation mistakes. You don't have mistakes of pressing the wrong buttons, and everything can be settled and eliminate all the inefficiencies. So blockchain has a great function in terms of eliminating inefficiencies and making sure that as long as the code is written properly, then things can be settled very, very quickly. So it basically disintermediates, right? That's a big word that most people never heard of before. Disintermediation means removing the central person in between. So a trusted central person can be like a bank, like a government, like a lawyer, like an accountant. And you no longer need this guy, because in between, as long as you have the code, the technology that can allow you to interact peer-to-peer, and on a public blockchain, everyone can see the transaction happening and everyone understands that that's the real transaction. There's no issue of something fraudulent happening, because it's almost impossible for something fraudulent to happen. Yeah. So there are so many applications.
How do you set up something like that? I mean, if you say, as in the first instance, if you want your educational credentials up somewhere, how would you go about doing it?
Oh, you can come to us. Okay. There are many platforms available right now. More and more of them are springing up. So basically, first of all, you have to choose a chain, right? Today, most of the NFTs, for example, are on Ethereum, the Ethereum mainnet. So let me digress a bit and give you a bit of background about Ethereum. So Bitcoin, as we all know, was the grandfather of all the cryptocurrencies. Satoshi Nakamoto, nobody knows who this is. Someone anonymous wrote a famous paper back in 2008, right after the Lehman Brothers collapse, and created this new concept. And he solved what is called the triple accounting problem, or the double spending problem. So a single accounting method is if you have your own list. You write on a piece of paper what you're going to buy from the grocery store, and then you go and buy it. That's you and yourself accounting. Double entry is how most financial systems work. You have one set, which is your assets and liabilities, and on the reverse side is your counterparty, and their assets are your liabilities are their assets, right? So this is double entry accounting. Now, triple entry accounting is the most fantastic thing about blockchain. What Bitcoin solved, what this paper from Satoshi solved, was that at the same time, everyone who's within the system will update their ledger at the same time. So it automatically, the blockchain technologies automatically update their asset register so that everybody has the same version. So nobody can cheat. You don't even need to update your own ledger. The whole system will do it for you. And this is the real power of triple accounting and updating a public ledger. Now, Bitcoin didn't have a capability called smart contracts, and Ethereum was the blockchain that actually popularized smart contracts. So in 2014, Vitalik Buterin, which is one of the co-founders of Ethereum, and a whole bunch of other techies came together to create this new blockchain called Ethereum. And the core functionality that they imputed into this Solidity programming language to create the Ethereum blockchain is this concept called smart contract. So smart contract basically means as long as you code something, the blockchain will execute the function. So most engineers or developers will understand, if something happens, then the next thing happens, and the next thing happens. So all this is coded. But the terminology that Ethereum came up with was a concept called smart contracts. So why do I say this? Because on the Ethereum smart contract, most other cryptocurrencies were born. Right? Most other cryptocurrencies were using the Ethereum blockchain to create their own languages, their own applications. So you can just imagine Ethereum is like English, right? And you have Australian English, Singaporean English, British English, you have American English, right? Of course, British, it will be the original, right? So all of these applications can be branching out of the original blockchain. And the original blockchain in this case is Ethereum. So most NFTs nowadays, most applications, I would say about 70 to 80% of all the market cryptocurrencies and protocols or layer 2 and other applications are all based out of Ethereum. So first, you have to decide which blockchain you want to mint your educational certificate on. So most people actually choose Ethereum. And then from Ethereum, then you choose whether you want to use one of the layer 2 technologies. Layer 2, you just imagine is like Ethereum, let's say, is a main highway, right? And then layer 2 means you branch off to an exit. And then that place that you exit off is layer 2, right? So each layer 2 technology would be something separate. It's like a silo, but it's faster, all right? So for example, Binance Smart Chain is another possibility. So if you want to mint your educational cert on a BEP20 protocol, it's actually Binance's version of Ethereum. So the highway, the superhighway is still Ethereum, but they have branched out into the Binance fork. And the Binance fork is the BEP20. So it's a complicated answer with your question, right? So when you choose, you can choose which protocol. So protocols would be things like Ethereum, now Cardano has smart contract capabilities. And then you have other things like Polkadot, you have Cosmos, Solana. These are all base layer protocols. The second thing is that based on the main layer, then you choose whether you want to use a second layer. So for example, if you want to choose Ethereum mainnet, but you want to use a layer 2 like Polygon or like Binance Smart Chain, then you can go off and use that one. Right, so you can mint on any of these. It's just like a programming language. Ask a developer, do they want to do it in JavaScript or do they want to do it in C++? It's just a choice of the language.
Yeah, thanks. So Daniel, you've joined us at a good time. We were just talking about the background to all these cryptocurrencies and blockchain and everything else and how it can be applied here. You are a relative newbie to this space as well. Would you care to share your reasons for getting into it and how it's been progressing and maybe some of the thinking that has helped shape what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So my thinking is very clear. I've been in fintech for the last 15 years, financial technology, and I always have had a ambition to democratize the world of finance as much as I can, because I saw a huge discrepancy between where the money is and where the money should go. Usually it ends up in the middle, and there's a lot of awesome companies out there who, because of a lack of funding, don't get to change the world or improve the world. And then on the other hand, you also have a lot of people who have wealth, who have money, even if it's small money, who could be put to the pool and thus give them a democratic voice. You know, money is the big driver in the world. So I did it for 10 years. I launched an idea, which became a company, which was took to the stock market, which eventually led the European equity crowdfunding scene. We helped over 650 companies raise money successfully, over $85 million. So we did quite well. And at the end of the day, we also started a small revolution globally, because once you establish something that works, it's very hard to turn back the clock. So legislator eventually agreed on that. And on EU level now, there's really good equity crowdfunding laws being implemented because we worked very closely to them. I've known Malcolm since 2015. So when I decided to leave that company, I contacted Malcolm. I told him that I'm interested to learn about crypto, and then Malcolm started to share very generously everything he knew, which is awesome. But then I realized for me that I can never go down in this rabbit hole deep enough. There's always going to be people who are more nerdy, more obsessed, more smart than me. So I instead of being threatened, as a lot of people are, and they don't dare to enter crypto, I thought about, okay, let me rethink this. Can I approach crypto from a user perspective and see how we can use the blockchain and crypto mentality and methods and technology instead of teaching the world complex things? Like, can we find use cases and then onboard people by having real life use cases. And that's basically where we are right now. A lot of our own products and a lot of our clients' products are are meant to be effective, either better fundraising tools or better tools for certain industries. And that's what I'm extremely excited about. I'm trying to explain all the time to people that, look, I built tech companies on the internet for the last 15 years. I don't necessarily understand how a computer works, or I would have never be able to build a microchip. Electricity, yeah, I get it in a plug. Like, I don't even know where electricity comes from anymore. Understand the, the water driving a turbine, those things, but I don't need to understand it fully to be able to use it. So that's basically where I see also the crypto world being right now, is that for the first 10, 15 years, it's been built by the passionate people, the connoisseurs, the nerds, the engineers. So now, of course, we want to see how can the billions come to the table and use the advantages. And we see a lot of advantages already, right? If you look at Axie Infinity, people are playing and they're earning money. If you look at NFTs, people can create art from any corner of the world. If you look at crypto, basically, if you have an online connection, some smart people around you, and a good vision, you can launch your own cryptocurrency. And then, of course, everything else that you can build. The problem I'm seeing is that our fantasy is still lacking, because if we compare crypto with Internet 96, like, the technology is there, awesome things are being done, but we haven't even yet grasped where this could go. Like in Internet 96, in 1996, nobody could imagine, the Arabic Spring or TikTok even, right? Or live broadcasts from space stations. That was utopian. That was, vision. And I think that's where we are in crypto right now. Like, you see a lot of crypto usage or blockchain usage, which is basically mimicking the old world, but in a more effective or better way. But it's still just a copy of the old one. What I'm really, really excited about is when I see new inventions or new ideas coming, or new application. I think that's the truly exciting one. And then, of course, the democratization part of it, that's what drives me a lot, because if you can use technology to even the playing field, globally, both for people who are raising money and doing awesome things, but also people who have money and want to join awesome things. I think that's where you truly create a landslide. So that's where we are, yeah.
Okay. With what you just said, the democratization of the space, right? There will always be resistance to that sort of thing. I mean, already so much of it has come through from governments. China has also weighed in on it. Do you see that sort of chipping away slowly at the resistance because they too realize the potential of this?
Yeah, when people ask me about this topic, and of course there's this question from the floor regarding the Chinese ban. China has banned crypto every year. So this is not the first time. Every year around September, they will make some announcements and say they banned crypto, but it hasn't changed anything, right? Their first big ban actually happened when I first started in September 2017. So at that time, it was crazy. Every day there were 100 or 200 new projects being launched. So a lot of people were getting into fever pitch. So the Chinese government had to cool the market down, and they had the first massive ban back then. But even before that, they already banned it a few times, right? If you look at the history of Bitcoin, you just troll through the internet history for the last 13 years, 12 years, you can see that Bitcoin has been pronounced dead over 300 times. So don't worry, it's still here to stay, all right? And how do you see that?
Yeah, which is definitely a really good point. As Malcolm says, look, there's been a lot of bans or attempts to change it, but the interest, the Bitcoin is still here. And this is my point. I think I'm going to come back to you, Kanan. Is there really a resistance, or is it some people who see their way of life being changed by better tools who are pushing back a bit, right? The world is run by huge bank lobbies and money, right? So they don't want to change that world. The system works well enough for a lot of people. So new things threaten. They threaten, the way of life. They threaten the way of making money, and they threaten the power balance. And I think that's definitely why people push back. The technology, a lot of people have, and this is stated by almost all the banks and governments in the world, is that it is interesting and apparently it's working. What they don't want to lose is control. So it's a huge difference between, is it a pushback, or, because I actually see the opposite. I don't see a pushback. I see China reacting or another country reacting. That's because there's a huge adoption. There's a huge surge from the bottom up where people want to come. And that's not a resistance, that's actually the opposite. But the resistance comes from people who say, wait, this is a bit too fast for us. We want to do it in our way. And also, can we see that we can keep our money flow and control? Nobody is leaving that voluntarily. Nobody would. So they're fighting tooth and nail. And at the end of the day, look, if you look at, I was talking to the head of central bank in Sweden, and in Sweden we had currencies and banks from the 1600s, right? One of the first countries in the world. And I told him, look, now we need to focus on crypto e-currency because that's the next wave. And said, yeah, definitely. But we had this long bank since the 1600s and currency that has been working just because we have been controlling it, meaning that we make sure that it's not crazy high or crazy low, or scammers come in. I don't really subscribe to that because I'm a bit more liberal. I believe that a lot of things can be decentralized and be more fair and will be more optimal. But I definitely think that in a regulated, positive environment, companies thrive differently because then VCs and people dare to invest even more rather than in an environment where you're not sure what the laws are from a day to day. So that's why Singapore is awesome, because the government has a clear stance compared to clearer stance compared to other countries.
With regards to cryptocurrency and blockchain adoption, you can only see one-way adoption. It's only the disbelievers who proclaim is fake, is a scam, and then they suddenly change, and they never change back. So anyone who always proclaimed that it was a scam and suddenly became a convert, I have never seen anyone who converted back and said, no, it actually is a scam, right? It's always one way progressive. So I can give a few examples. One famous example is Mark Cuban. Now he's putting so many investments into NFTs, into the marketplace. He's coming out and making announcements. Elon Musk, another guy. Both of them originally were anti-crypto. Back in 2014, Mark Cuban came out publicly saying Bitcoin is a scam, cryptocurrency is a scam. In 2016, he changed his tune. He said, okay, I have 10% of my wealth in crypto now. So he changed his mind. And today he's advocating, crypto, NFTs, DeFi are going to change and revolutionize the financial ecosystem. Everyone should be getting into it. Another big example, since we talk about Mark Cuban, he's on the Shark Tank, right? So his fellow speaker, Kevin O'Leary, has always been a Bitcoin naysayer. He's always saying, no, cryptocurrencies are bad, Bitcoin is bad. And then early this year, he said, oh, actually, Bitcoin is okay. I will invest in it once it's green. So people change their minds, right? So governments are worried about losing control, exactly like Daniel said. When governments are around to tax you and to control you, right? And to make sure that they control the money. So anything that threatens the money order, that threatens the monetary policy and fiscal policies will, of course, present a huge existential threat to governments. So they are iterating along. So today, most governments around the world are already adopting various implementations of central bank digital currencies. They're digitizing their currency. Look, 3 years ago, hardly anyone was doing it. I think the first government that came into the picture, I think was the Bahamas, the cent dollars. And that was about 2 years ago. And that was one government. Today, practically every month, the new government is saying, okay, it's going to pass a new regulation that is allowing cryptocurrencies. In fact, some of them even adopted Bitcoin as the standard for their own currency. So that's something that you would never think about.
Accepted it, right?
Yeah. El Salvador,
of course,
and then Paraguay.
El Salvador is first, right? First, you get some Central American countries where the currency and inflation is really bad, and they start using it. And the positive about that is, of course, data, right? All the governments are now receiving real life data. It's not theories anymore, because in theory, the governments use careful calculations or careful predictions, right? But in real life, that's proper data. You can't deny data. So whatever is going to happen in El Salvador is going to be a benchmark for a lot of people in the rest of the world. And surely more countries will come. When Bitcoin first started, nobody adopted it, and then it became hugely adopted. Then slowly more and more people came, as Malcolm said, Mark Cuban. People who were vocally against crypto suddenly became huge fans because they understood. And I think this is the issue. Look, I was reluctant towards the internet at the beginning. I didn't have an online bank for years because I was still writing my hand checks, because I was used to that. I trusted that method. I didn't need a better method. Why change something that is working, right? Look at equity crowdfunding or crypto, which are very similar. Why change the world of finance when it's working? And it does work, but it works for very, very few people and I wouldn't say at the top, very, very few people who know the right people, because you could be anywhere in the world and you don't necessarily need to be in a top position. And this is my point. But for the rest of the world, it is an uneven playing field, or the one size fits all type of governmental regulation perhaps doesn't fit anymore, because we are getting more and more in an individualistic mindset. In the next 100 years, a lot of things will change dramatically, because how we perceive data, how we create relationships, how we build companies. Look at our company, for instance. I haven't met anybody in the team ever besides Malcolm because of Corona, and it works extremely effective, right? And Malcolm I met in 2018 last time, right? But it works. Trust travels. Technology is effective. But we change our way of lives. And then suddenly when somebody is offering you something and you get it, it's really hard to take that gift back. Almost like, I'm going to give you freedom, but it's going to be conditioned freedom. So I think this is the fun part. Right now, a lot of people in crypto and people who are coming to crypto are focused on the wealth increase, wealth placement, and those kinds of things, right? Because that's what they see. They see the coin values go up and go down. If you look at what we are doing internally in the company, and you realize that with the blockchain and with the available technology, you can actually launch a currency in a matter of days if you're effective, or you can actually create a new company in a matter of hours with smart blockchain contracts or lending protocols. That's a huge revolution. Almost like something that in 2008 you needed a room full of servers if you had an e-commerce company with guards guarding it. And then now it's somewhere in the cloud. It's $20 to host a website in a year, even if you have the heavy data. Those revolutions doesn't happen overnight, but they are happening. And I think this is what excites me a lot. And if I'm looking for my client perspective, for them it's the same thing. It's an empowerment tool. It's a money-making tool. It's a way to bypass certain gatekeepers, but it's also a way to accelerate things. If you look, for instance, at an initial decentralized offering, an ICO, for instance, in the olden day, you would do a 3-year project at least before you invited other people in. Now you do the opposite. You fundraise by issuing tokens, which are future value on what you're building, which is the opposite of a stock market listing, but it has similar mechanisms. It's not a new invention, it's just a more effective and smarter invention. And obviously everybody who's running stock exchanges globally, they are not liking this, because this threatens their methods and their livelihood. It's almost like, look, in the 1900s, in every country in the world, we had extremely successful candle factories, like candle manufacturers. And they weren't happy when electricity came. For them, that was the way of life. And that the candle makers started a huge lobby against electricity. That's why we still today think that a DC current is better than regular current. So that's why, for instance, Tesla lost versus Edison. That was a huge lobby from the electricity industry. And if you look now further, 140 years later, we still have candles. We're still using candles. We still like candles, right? But we have a better system, which the rest of the world has adapted and doesn't even think about it anymore. And that's where we are heading with blockchain and the entire crypto industry. I feel that it's better, it's a bit more effective, extremely cost effective, but also it changes the power dynamic. Suddenly, a kid from a poor village in Africa or India can become the next big internet sensation just by executing flawlessly, instead of a huge 10,000 people corporation from Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So what would trigger mass adoption of crypto, you think?
The tipping point is a simple concept, right? Whenever you have something new, once you have enough adopters, then there's no going back, right? Then more and more adopters will come in. Look at the internet now. There are billions of people on it. At a certain point in time, it was very, very few people. But as more and more people come in, then you will see that. So what are the major factors for this? If you have an application that people want, like I said, retail investors or retail users, consumers, and it's on the blockchain, it's on a cryptocurrency, then more people will come in. If, for example, let's say in a Singaporean context, we have GrabPay, right? If, let's say, Grab came up with their own cryptocurrency, and then people who are using the wallet start adopting this, then I think this will take off, because there are so many people using it. Or another major push towards adoption is actually ironically, central bank digital currencies. Because once governments make it easy for people to understand that cryptocurrency is nothing special. There's not some archaic thing that they don't understand, they cannot use. Once people start transacting with electronic money, and actually it's a very similar technology to cryptocurrencies, then people will understand, okay, it's nothing magical, right? I can use it and I don't need to be afraid. So I think these are huge push factors. Mass adoption.
Definitely.
And the governments are pushing out the CBDCs.
Definitely. And I also think, like right now, the artists and the musicians of the world, they're leading this revolution for us, right? They create NFTs. NFTs are visual, they're simple to understand. So they break down the entry points. I think once you're in, the entry points are fairly high because it's hard to understand. Like for me, just understanding the concept of a wallet and different networks, that was mind blowing, right? Until somebody gave me the explanation. Like, look, it's like in Tokyo, you have 3 subways going in the same direction, and you have 3 different subway stops, but it's one is private, one is governmental, and one is semi-governmental. So that's once I understood that, because in the stock market world, you have one stock exchange and you have one, it's not different type of networks or adaptations or wallets you need to create or add manually stuff. But once you understand the basics, then you understand how to start digging into the rabbit hole. So what I see is that Malcolm and I, we have a huge responsibility and a huge job to basically give a lot of people keys, right? Small keys and small steps to enter. You bring them in with NFTs, you bring them in with popular projects, you bring them in by, lowering the barriers or being available. Like if you look at us, Technicorum, everybody in the Technicorum, we are extremely transparent. We are on all social medias. We are extremely generous in giving advice and, sometimes even hand-holding people through the processes, which of course takes time from us, takes energy from us, but it helps us gain, the connection to the networks. But as Malcolm said, the entry points are a bit too high right now. First you need to do a certain amount of steps. So not all banks allow you to take money from your bank account into a crypto account, right? Because they lose that money. So some banks might even stop you there. But once you've done it, let's say you bought an NFT or you produced your first NFT or you joined a popular ICO because you're an influencer or your celebrity promoted it or because you like a certain topic, then you're in. And once you're in, then then it's almost like a magical bonanza, because I think fear is one of the biggest driver. And once again, look, not all of us were early adopters of the internet. I'm quite sure that both Malcolm and Kanan, you were a bit later on in the game compared to other friends or other people that you might know. And this is the same thing here. Bitcoin and crypto hasn't been around for such a long time, and especially the new wave of crypto, as I call it right now, when a lot of people are coming and you see a lot more stability, that's needed. And then of course, as Malcolm said, we need to start seeing real life usage. You need to see wherever, let's say in an e-commerce shop, you need to see dollar, euro, UN, Bitcoin, and Ethereum as a value. So you always get reminded, oh, there's different currencies now. It's not just the big governmental flat ones, it's also others. And I think all those things are happening, and more people are working on this, and then eventually people will come. But I would also say like this, we think that the internet and the regular world of finance is adopted or easy accessible, but it's not, right? It's still a lot of people who are not in this system or cannot enter, not even the old financial system. How can we expect them to enter the new one? But the positive, of course, is that we have the billions of people on our side, and then also it moves extremely fast, while governments and other people who try to stop this, they're very slow and very small compared to the billions, right? And then once you have data like in El Salvador, governments can make easier decisions.
Yeah, okay. There's a question here in the chat about Daniel from South Sudan. He was asking about the use of crypto in charity. Is there a use case for that where it could be more effectively utilized?
Yep, certainly. So like I mentioned earlier, provenance is very important. The meaning of provenance is that you can prove where it came from, right? So for example, a simple example is diamonds, right? You hear the phrase from De Beers, diamonds are a girl's best friend. So diamonds typically have certificates, and the certificates show ownership. And I'm sure you have heard of the phrase called blood diamonds as well. So blood diamonds are actually from conflict resolution, conflict areas in Africa where these diamonds are mined by the people who are put to work as slaves. And that's why you call it a conflict diamond. So when you buy a diamond, it's very important to you to find out whether it was actually one of these conflict diamonds or whether there is a proof of certification. So this is something that blockchain can solve, because earlier I mentioned once you have the proof of authenticity and you can show provenance, chain of ownership, then you know whether something is real. So in the charity space, it's the same thing. Let's say this random charity comes up and then asks you for money and you give the money. Do you know where the money went? Very few people do, right? But if you have something that is a charity blockchain, then provenance can be proven. You can see that the exact money that you have put in goes to the right places. So this is a huge important application for charities, for any kind of thing, whether it's food or diamonds or your certificates or whatnot, supply chain, and in this case, charity. You, the person who's involved in this whole chain, wants to know that your money actually went to the right guy. Previously, many years ago, we had the tsunami that happened, right? The huge tsunami. And there were so many dollars that were raised by all these charities in Singapore, in the more developed countries, to aid the people in Indonesia because they had, massive disasters. And I was told, I read some statistics that only 1% of the money that was raised went to the people on the ground who were the victims. 99% of them went to the middlemen. So it's important for you, if you are running a charity, to know that the money that you donate actually goes to the right people. So blockchain is a huge application for this. NFTs
I think what Michael's saying here
is
is incredibly interesting, because all transactions, and this is a huge word, all the transactions are out in the public and can be monitored and verified by anybody. Tell me one system in the world that's like that. Like every year there's a bank being caught of defrauding or laundering money, right? In a transparent system, people behave differently. And just imagine journalists and how they will change the world of life. Instead of having deep throat witnesses in garages, they will just follow the blockchain and see exactly how money is behaving. They will see definitely how transactions are done, and all that data aggregates also psychological behavior patterns. Something that I like to talk a lot about, there's a huge lobby against crypto, saying that it's used for illegal and criminal activities, which it is, right? Every currency in the world is used for some illegal and some other currencies. In crypto, there's data, right? In 2019, 2.6% of the crypto transactions was used for legal transactions, and in 2020, it was very little, 0.9%, which is still a lot. But nobody talks about how much the percentage of the dollar is used for illegal transaction, for instance. And it's almost a double the numbers. So I think that's also interesting. But on the dollar, or on the euro, or the yuan, it's extremely hard to follow the transactions. Some people, they follow their transactions. The finance inspections, they have the role to monitor only when problems happen. But in crypto, and Bitcoin, and in the blockchain, everybody can monitor all transactions all the time and verify them and see the entire flow of it. Meaning that, once again, a kid in a village in a subdeveloped country can be suddenly a smarter monitor of proper transactions than a governmental agent from London, for instance, right? And that's also something that we're going to see a huge shift in a lot. When I was working with equity crowdfunding, a lot of people said, look, this is going to be a tool for frauds, which a lot of people were afraid of. We had zero frauds just because of transparency. In transparent systems, shady people tend to hide. Light is the best way to look at the system. And I'm not bashing banks here. I'm not saying that. But the problem that we are having is that the current system is ineffective. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of people who are misusing the system and are allowed to continue. And in the new one, the same people are shouting wolf, right? And the same people are saying that watch out for a new system. But it's always been like this. Every new system that has been introduced to the world has had pushback at a certain point in time. Trains, for instance, people were afraid that if you travel faster than 14 kilometers an hour, your body would explode, right? So for like 10, 15 years, the first trains never rode faster than 14 kilometers an hour, which is insane now, but for them it made sense at that point in time. So that's something that I'm, from a historian, a psychological and user perspective, extremely fascinated about. But if you look at from a business perspective, being able to fundraise, being able to engage your fans early on, being able to create different systems, having a stable chain on which to build technology, that's extremely advantageous right now, because you can build companies far faster and far more effective than you could ever in time. And I think for me, that's a huge revolution. Like I see a lot of my entrepreneurial friends who see blockchain and crypto as, a huge emancipator.
So when do you think the Ethereum 2.0 merge will be? Ethereum 2.0 was supposed to happen 3 years ago. So yes, it is way delayed. So the earliest I see this happening is probably late next year. That's an individual monetized NFTs. So because NFTs can lend itself to so many digital applications, you literally look around you, everything can be digitized and it can be made an NFT. So you are essentially asking, how does anything that is an asset monetize? So it is possible, but some of the most interesting applications are like what Daniel mentioned earlier, Axie Infinity, which is gamification. So the next phase right now is GameFi. You've never heard of this word before, but game finance. So people can earn a good living, in fact, earn more than doctors and lawyers in some of the developing countries by just playing games all the time. Right, so you have games like Axie Infinity, and in fact, we are developing some of these interesting platforms and games as well. So if you want to know more about it, you can always reach out to us. So you can just go into a game system or the ecosystem, participate in it, play, and then win something, and then you can convert that into real dollars by fiat off ramps. So that's another interesting way that NFTs can be monetized right now.
If in the real world, if you had a problem, you could go to some agency or authority body who would then take up your case and follow through, ideally. Would similar sort of situations be in place?
No, especially if you're talking about decentralization and DeFi, then as long as there's no central authority, it's very, very hard to reverse transactions. It is possible. You can still go back to the central authorities. Like, for example, a huge famous hack happened of Ethereum back in 2015. There was what they call 2016. There was a child DAO, right? That was created out of the DAO. There was a big project on Ethereum blockchain. So there was a massive hack, and I think $50 million was stolen. So what the Ethereum Foundation decided was they came together and decided to reverse the transaction. So it's possible on the blockchain, because blockchain is like a continuous block. At this point, if there's a massive hack, people who control the blockchain can say, okay, as of this point, let's go back to this, move back into that block, and then move on from there. So that's what happened to Ethereum. They reversed a massive hack, and then Ethereum today was a fork from that. The original Ethereum is now called Ethereum Classic. So actually, these are two different cryptocurrencies. So you can often hear or see about big hacks, big thefts are happening on the internet for blockchains. So some of the centralized exchanges like Coinbase, like Binance, like Huobi, they can actually take an active decision to look into the thing that happened, and then to freeze the account and to return it once they have done the investigations. But these points of assistance can only happen if you address the right party and if the currency actually went there. If the currency went into another exchange that nobody controls or you don't know the controllers of, that's too bad, you can't. But if they went to these highways, it's like the police putting up a roadblock. So it is possible to stop something if something happened, but it takes a lot of coordination and people to actually put up their hand and say they will help.
Looking at Bitcoin, it seems to be far ahead of all the others in terms of value. Today it's 51,000 US, I think. Ethereum is 3,000. Then the others are like a few hundreds and $1 and stuff. I mean, this gap is quite huge. Do you ever see it reducing, or do you see Bitcoin just sort of surging further ahead? There's prediction of 135,000.
Yeah, the main interesting thing about Bitcoin is the economics. So there are only 21 million coins ever for Bitcoin, and probably 10 to 15% of them have been lost forever already. So this is a market supply and basic economics, supply and demand. So the total supply, because it's only 21 million, will then lend itself to Bitcoin having a large value. But if you look at Ethereum, I think it's at over 100 million supply, and it's continuing to mint more. So if you compare a 21 million system against a 100 million system, of course, the 100 million system will be less, right? Until more and more people adopt Ethereum and it can push up in price. So it's a simple function of mathematics. There are many coins out there. Increasingly, we are seeing all these meme coins like Shiba Inu and all that. They have 1 quadrillion supply. 1 quadrillion, that's how many times more than 21. I don't even know how many times more than 21 million that is. So of course the price per coin will be much less. So you don't necessarily look just purely on the face value, because one very interesting thing about cryptocurrencies is that most of them are very fractionalized. You can go 18 zeros. You know, your dollar can only go 2 zeros, right? You can go to 1 cent. There's no half of a cent. But coins typically have 18 zeros, so you can fractionalize until very, very far out. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And of course, it's a snap factor, right? If you want to show off and say you have a Bitcoin, you want to show 1 Bitcoin, you don't want to show 0.001. so
Yes.
only 21 million people in the world can have 1 Bitcoin, right? If you do it that way. So of course, there are 7 to 8 billion people will go for the Bitcoin. Yeah.
The big question is, of course, do we think that Bitcoin is going to be the #1 currency 10 years from now or not, or is going to be different ones? If you look historically, the only thing that is constant is change, right? So there's a huge likelihood that the Bitcoin is going to be extremely valuable per piece, as Malcolm says, because of the scarcity, but also because it's the most popular right now. But things tend to change fairly fast. If you look at Ethereum was born out of a frustration, right? So, and that became now the 2nd biggest currency. And then suddenly some people from Ethereum who didn't like Ethereum well enough, they started Cardano. And Cardano now promises to be the next big thing. And that's the 3rd type of currency. And then, of course, you have this, the anomalies, the Dogecoins and the Shibas and such, which are fun, but it's eventually they also hit critical mass and they became like the dollar. Somebody was actually, in a funny perspective saying, look, the biggest shitcoin in the world is the US dollar, right? There's too much coins minted. 1% holds 30% of the total value. There's a lot of currencies are being lost. The real life usage is not as good as before. And also 25% of all minted US dollars in circulation was minted in the last 12 or 16 months, right? So on that definition, it is the shittiest of the shit coins, right? But the dollar has trust, right? It's the only connectivity is trust. The dollar doesn't have a connection to gold as a paired value since the 60s. Yeah. So the only pairing between the dollar is the trust for the Federal Reserve, which is still high and intact. But do we think that trust is going to continue year by year, or it's going to change? So what I predict is that definitely, look, the Bitcoin, everybody should own a Bitcoin. That's a sentence that a lot of people are using right now, and that drives the price of Bitcoin up. What I would definitely look at is, is the new coins. The new coins are those who are becoming interesting. If you look at, the founder of Dogecoin, he sold all his Dogecoins to buy a car, a Honda Accord. I think it was like $4,000 or $3,000. Now Doge is bigger than the entire Honda corporation, right? So I think the mentality in crypto has to be patience, because a Bitcoin was not worth 50,000 US dollar 10 years ago. It was worth a cent. And, Malcolm, who's been around the longest of all of us, he saw all the changes in Bitcoin prices, in all these years. I had a full Bitcoin. I sold it for $1,400 and I was very happy because I made a profit. But I made 30% profit. I bought it cheaper. I was actually happy that I could sell at that price. And I didn't believe that the price would surge, because that was my information at that point. Yeah. Now suddenly I have a 10-year pension portfolio, right, in crypto.
I think a lot of this is about the information flow, right? I suppose if we have more opportunities to share information and give people a clearer picture of what lies ahead, it will be a lot easier for people to come into the space and take advantage of it and make better use of it. Malcolm and Daniel, thank you so much for all. It's been a lot said, a lot to take in. But I think it was also cleared up a lot of things. I know there's some questions that haven't been answered. If you do want to have the question, you can always try and email me, and I'll forward it on to Malcolm or Daniel and see what sort of response they will have.